this video, we're going to focus on what's going on in Canada today. The learning objectives in this video is number one, we want to be able to talk a little bit about Canada's government and compare it to the United States government. We want to discuss the unique physical and cultural traits that each separate region of Canada has going on. And finally, we want to talk a little bit about Canada's economy. Canada's government is what we call a constitutional monarchy. This means that they have a king or a queen plus a constitution which limits their power. In Canada, their king is shared with the King of England. Because they are so far away, the king appoints a governor general to Canada who represents him in the Canadian government. The king and the governor general have very little power in the day-to-day operations of Canada. Peace, order, and good government is a statement that comes directly from Canada's Constitution, and it's something that Canadians value. The Canadian government is led by a prime minister. And if you remember when we were talking about governments, what Canada has is very similar to the United Kingdom. It's a parliamentary democracy. The prime minister holds a similar position to that of the president, in that they are the head of the country's government. The prime minister is democratically elected, typically every 5 years in Canada. The current prime minister's name is Justin Trudeau, and he's seen here in this picture. He's been serving in that position since November 4th, 2015. Canada's prime minister oversees the country's parliament, or their lawmaking body. Parliament consists of a House of Commons and the Senate. Canadians elect members of the House of Commons. They're called MPs, or Members of Parliament. Senators, on the other hand, are appointed by the Governor General based on the advice of the Prime Minister. There are 105 senators and 338 members of the House of Commons. Canada's Supreme Court, the highest court in Canada and the final court of appeals in the Canadian justice system, there are 9 judges who sit on the Canadian Supreme Court. As we've learned earlier in this chapter, Canada doesn't have states. Instead, they have 10 provinces, and each of those 10 provinces has their own provincial governments. They are led by what we call a premier. A premier is kind of like a governor. So if we think of the provinces like states in the United States, each state is headed by a governor, each province is headed by a premier. Canada's central government is similar to our central government in that they use a federal system. The Canadian federal system lets people keep their feelings of loyalty to their own province. Canada's physical geography separates the country into 4 different regions. People living on the Pacific Coast and British Columbia are isolated from Canadians that are living in the eastern provinces. Differences in culture also help define these regions. Cultural differences between English-speaking and French-speaking Canadians have led to challenges throughout most of Canada. English is the main language spoken, but in Quebec, most people speak French. When the Canadians from different regions discuss important issues, they are often influenced by what we call regionalism. Regionalism refers to the strong connection that people feel toward the region in which they live. In some places, the connection with the region is even stronger than the connection with their country. Let's talk about some of the different regions and provinces that exist here in Canada. We're going to start with the eastern provinces, which can be seen on the map in the pink-colored provinces. These are sometimes referred to as the maritime provinces. This region is found along the Atlantic coast and it includes New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. Sometimes they're referred to as the maritime provinces because maritime means on or near the sea. This region of Canada is defined by its short growing season, which limits farming. However, some farming is done on Prince Edward Island. They're known for their potato farms. Most of their economy in the eastern provinces is related to forestry and the fishing industries. Many of the people who live in this region are the descendants of immigrants who came from the British Isles. In addition, French-speaking families have moved from Quebec to New Brunswick. Most of the region's people live in coastal cities. where industrial plants and fishing and shipping ports employ many people. As you move further inland from the eastern provinces, you'll find the provinces of Quebec and Ontario. These provinces are known as the Heartland. More than half of all Canadians live in these two provinces. The provincial capital of Quebec is also called Quebec or Quebec City. The city's older section has narrow streets, stone walls, and French-style architecture. Montreal is Canada's second largest city, and it's one of the largest French-speaking cities in the world, with over 3.5 million people living there. Montreal is the financial and industrial center of the Quebec province. Winters in Montreal are very cold. In order to adapt to the environment, the people of Montreal use underground passages like the one seen here in the photo and overhead tunnels to move between buildings in the city's downtown region. The residents of Quebec, the province, are referred to as Québécois. They believe that their province should be given special status. They argue that the special status would recognize the cultural differences between their province and the rest of Canada. Some even want Quebec to become its own independent country. On the other hand, many English-speaking Canadians think that Quebec already has too many privileges. Most Canadians support a united Canada. Strong feelings of regionalism will continue to be an important issue for Canada moving forward. Now, the province of Ontario, which is what we're looking at here, in fact, this is Toronto, Ontario, is Canada's leading manufacturing province. Hamilton is Ontario's leading center of the steel industry. Canada exports much of their steel to the United States. Ontario's capital is Toronto. It is a major center for industry, finance, education, and culture. Toronto's residents come from many different parts of the world, including China, Europe, and India. Canada's capital is Ottawa, which is also located in Ontario. In Ottawa, both English and French is spoken. The city is known for its grand government buildings, parks, and several universities. West of Ontario are what we sometimes refer to as the Prairie Provinces of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. On the Pacific coast is the province of British Columbia. Together, we call them Canada's Western Provinces. More people live in Quebec than all of the Prairie provinces combined. The southern grassland of these provinces are part of the rich wheat belt. Farms in this region produce more wheat than all of Canada needs, therefore, the surplus can be exported to other countries. Oil and natural gas is also very important to the economy of Alberta. The beauty of the Canadian Rockies attracts many visitors to national parks in western Alberta and eastern British Columbia. British Columbia is Canada's westernmost province and home to almost 4 million people. The province is rich in natural resources, including forests, salmon, and valuable minerals. Nearly half of the province's population lives in and around the coastal city of Vancouver. Their location on the Pacific coast facilitates trade with countries in Asia. And finally, we've come to Canada's fourth region, the Canadian North. Northern Canada is extremely cold. The territory includes the Yukon Territory, the Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. This land makes up more than 1/3 of Canada's country, but only around 100,000 people live in all of this land. Nunavut is a new territory that was created just for the Inuit people who live there. Nunavut, the word, means our land in the Inuit language. Nunavut has its own distinctive culture and government that rules over the 30,000 people who live there. Canada has many valuable natural resources that we've already discussed earlier in this chapter. Much of their economy is based on industries associated with those resources. Canada also benefits from trade, mainly with the United States. Canada is one of the world's leading mineral producers. They mine valuable titanium, zinc, iron ore, gold, and coal. Their iron and steel industries use iron ore to manufacture products like planes, automobiles, and household appliances. Most Canadians work in service industries like tourism, Canada's fastest growing service industry. Canada's economy benefits from the millions of dollars spent by visitors each year. As I mentioned, trade is also important to Canada's economy. Many of their natural resources are exported to countries around the world, but their best trade partner is the United States. As the world's largest trading relationship, Canada and the United States rely heavily on each other. Over 60% of Canada's imported goods come from the United States, and 85% of Canada's exports are sent to the United States. However, the United States has recently placed tariffs or added taxes on Canadian timber and other goods. American companies believed that Canadian companies were selling their products at unfairly low prices. Canada argued that the tariffs violated the North American Free Trade Agreement that was signed by Canada and the United States and Mexico. So what we learned in this lesson is that Canada has several distinct regions that are separated by both geography and culture. The United States and Canada are great trading partners that share a common history, border, and language. And regionalism presents a major challenge for the Canadian people.